name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about nerdy stuff. This is the kind of nerd that I wish I could go back in time and tell 12-year-old Rachel about, because this is very specifically appealing to one of the core roots of my personal nerdiness. I was contacted by a guy named Kyle Derek McDonald, who commissioned me to review his work, and his work is something that is not like anything I have reviewed on this channel before. Not in a bad way, just in a very, very different way. He commissioned me to review his work called The Blessed Epic. Many of you know that I love graphic audio productions. The last time that I read The Lord of the Rings,
You shall not pass!
I read them the graphic audio version. So graphic audio is where you have like a full cast, you have sound effects, you have music. That's how I listened to The Lord of the Rings the last time I read it, and that's also how I just listened to Elantris by Brandon Sanderson in the graphic audio production. And I also listened this year to Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan, and initially I was reading it on the normal audio, and when I switched to the graphic audio, I was having a much better time with it. I started watching The Lord of the Rings when I was 12 years old. I've been chasing that high ever since. So graphic audio of high fantasy does that for me in a very specific way. It is transporting me in a way that I don't find in other versions of the same work except for film. But usually when there's a graphic audio, there is a book version. But this, The Blessed Epic that I'm going to talk about today, it's not really a book. It is an epic fantasy poem, a novel-length epic fantasy poem in graphic audio with a full cast and a score that McDonald composed himself. So it's very unlike anything I've dabbled in before. I can't say read because I sort of read it. I mean, it was on the screen in front of me, but I mostly absorbed it through the audio. I will say though that there is some reading required because there are footnotes, and I love footnotes. Everybody knows on here that I don't like Jay Kristoff as a person, but I will say that I did like in Nevernight the use of footnotes. I liked them. I know that a lot of people don't like them, but I think that they add to the story personally. And the footnotes, I'll come back to all this, is actually a really good point, because this is obviously not a novel. This is not really a book. So it's very hard. I mean, this is a huge amount of labor in a way I hadn't really considered until I was about halfway through, because writing is already very difficult, but to create an entire story in an incredibly rigid structure is so hard to pull off. And I was sort of in awe because people aren't typically doing this kind of thing anymore. Unfortunately, what comes with that though is people are less likely to reach for stories written this way, but I enjoyed it and I'm hoping to help it find its audience if I can. The Blessed Epic is something that I think will appeal very specifically to Lord of the Rings fans, like myself, who want something a little different. Not so much content-wise, because you're getting that fantasy story that you crave as a fellow nerd with the wizards and the dragons and the gods and the magic. It's not content-wise, it's experience-wise. So you've likely never experienced something like this before outside of film, but then again, it's in poem format. That alone makes it a very unique experience. Kyle has created a full cast epic story completely in poem format, and I was very skeptical about this, but I ended up having a blast with it. I don't know a ton about poetry though, and I am embarrassed to say this actually. I used to write poetry in middle school about The Lord of the Rings. So, are you having secondhand embarrassment? Yikes. I didn't really know what I was doing. I would love for my patron Hannah to listen to this The Blessed Epic, this audio production, because she is a poet and I would love to hear her thoughts on it. I did tell her that if she finally created her YouTube channel, I will leave it linked below. I told her that I do want to learn more about poetry, so this was like a fun way to sort of kick that into gear. I do want to start reviewing more poetry. I bought a friend's poetry book. I want to learn more about it and review it. So this is the first in finally getting into what I said I was going to do and start reviewing some poetry. All that to say, this is not something I have reviewed before, but I'm very excited about it. I think that it'll really appeal to like a very particular fan base. I will say though that while I was listening to it, I couldn't help but think, man, I wish this was animated, because I feel like we already have the score and the cast and the sound effects. We might as well just throw some animation onto this and make it into a whole like video production. What animated production? So The Blessed Epic is set in a world called Terravir, and it's getting conquered more and more by this guy named Zolas, who is sort of this enigma. Not a lot is known about him. He comes from another realm, and we, at the beginning of our story, see this guy named Virilis, who is a warrior with a tragic backstory, and he meets up with a wizard. It's a wizard named Sajir, who is the steward of Taravir, and Sajir is like, Virilis, my guy, I would really love your help in defeating Zolas. And it's called the Blessed because there are people who are sort of like the hands of the gods in this world. These people who are like the hands of the gods doing like the gods' work in the world are the Blessed. So it's a fantasy setting with wizards and dragons and monsters and little sprites, and regular humans who are under attack from a ruthless warlord. And it's very much like your typical fantasy, and what you're really there for are meeting new characters that you can fall in love with in a fantasy setting. But you're experiencing this through this very different format that you have not experienced since you read things like the Iliad, which is actually part of where Kyle got the inspiration to this. There's like a whole thing on the website, and I will link the website where you can listen to the Blessed Epic down below. He was inspired by the Iliad and the Odyssey, and what's the other ones, like Beowulf and shit. And he actually said that the first draft was really bad, and it was like almost completely a knockoff of the Lord of the Rings. And now it's this enormous production that's like 15,000 lines of poetry, which is just pretty incredible that he's been working on this so long. I thought it was so cool and so fun and so different from anything that I've experienced. I can't say read because I didn't really, like, the pages are in front of you, but it's not like you're really reading it except for the footnotes. It's more about having it read to you. But you are going to be read like different words that, because it is told in Old English, there are a bunch of words that you will not know because they are not typically used. So you do need the footnotes below. So often there was a word where I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? So the first thing I wrote down about this was that this has great sound effects. This really is such a quality production in its use of sound effects. Again, Kyle created the score and did it himself, like he composed it himself, and that was so cool. So we have this setup where it's like these gods and their proteges, and then we're also introduced to a really cute sprite named Frey. She is very sassy, and she was my favorite character out of everybody. I really enjoyed her. Her voice is like very squeaky because she's little. So the person who voiced her was so good, and such like a great voice actress, like really nailed it. And right off the bat, you have footnotes like telling you these new words that new to me certainly, but it's actually Old English. And it sort of reminded me how like recently I've been trying to learn Brazilian Portuguese. And so I'd have to go to the footnotes, and they're on the bottom of the page. And it was like, because it's in English, but it's Old English, so it's being basically translated to you in certain words, just like a few words every page. And it was funny because I'm like, Jesus, some of these words, like I feel like I've seen them in other contexts before, and they did not mean that. But it was sort of like learning an entire new language. However, that does bring me to the point that I think that this will be very difficult for anybody who is not a native English speaker, because even for me, I would have to refer to footnotes on every single page. So if you're not a native English speaker, I'm not sure how much this would work for you. Immediately, what really threw me was how rigid the structure is. So it's like 6 lines, and I don't remember the structure, and I honestly forget everything I ever learned about poetry, but it's like every other line rhymes, I believe. And imagine, like, it's already really difficult to world build, but imagine trying to world build and having to make it rhyme. I'm trying to think of how, like, I have a work in progress that, again, will never see the light of day, and I'm trying to think of how I would sit there and try to rework all the work I've done to build this world in my head, and then have to sit there and make everything rhyme. But not just that, but also make every dialogue between people rhyme. While I loved Ray, the sprite who hangs out with our main characters, Sajir and Virilis, Sajir again is the wizard, and Virilis is sort of our hero who's going to like conquer Zolas, this evil warlord, right? And I love Ray hanging out with all 3 of them. However, I will say that I don't think the women in this were as well written as they could have been. I think that the men got to go and like be really cool all the time, and the women were not as great, including Frey sometimes. She could be sort of shitty to other women, but it's certainly not as bad as some other high fantasy that I have read. Again, like we talked about J. Kristoff earlier, it's nowhere near anywhere close to that. I just feel like they could have been written a little bit better. Like, we're introduced to basically a love goddess, and she was shitty. Like, she was really shitty, and I didn't understand, like, why we didn't make a single woman, like, cool from beginning to end. I mean, Frey, the only thing about Frey was that she sort of, like, dabbled in a little bit of whorephobia. Other than that, she was great, and I loved her, but the rest of them, I was like, oh, you're being kind of shitty all of a sudden. The love goddess, and then later we come across basically, like, a wildlands lady who can speak to animals, which I loved. I loved that for me. That's one of my favorites. I love animal companions. Actually, we have a fair amount of animal companions in here. At one point we get a panther animal companion, but there's also like ogres and there's a dragon. Frey's backstory was actually kind of cool and sad, and I wasn't expecting to get any backstory about Frey, but she's a sprite and she comes from this tree, this like mother tree, and the way that the sprites maintain this mother tree was actually really interesting. And again, having to explain all of this within the confines of having to make everything rhyme, I was pretty impressed by that. But Frey, she actually left her siblings, and there was a lot of fallout because she just abandoned them, and that was actually really heartbreaking, that whole story. I was very impressed. I wasn't expecting that. I honestly just need more stories about sprites. I don't think there's enough sprites. I just think that we leave them out of stories. The only other one I can think of that is a side character with this much page time, screen time, I don't know what to call it, is the like sprite type fairy in the Falconer series, which actually reminds me quite a bit of this in the relationship between like Frey the sprite and plot wise, no, but the sprite stuff is definitely there. And if you have any recommendations about sprites, books with sprites in them where the sprite is like really actually featured, oh, I'm just realizing that Frey's backstory is a lot like Tinkerbell. That actually, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe I just like Tinkerbell. Another one of the women that we come across is this queen named Cassie, and I really did not like her, and you weren't supposed to, but I felt like there wasn't really a need for her to be so shitty. After they meet Cassie, they realize that the gods, even though like the blessed are the hands of the gods, the gods have been silent for quite some time. Our main characters split up for a little bit, so Virilis and Frey, they go out to try to meet with the ogres, and this is where they come across and they find a panther companion, which I love animal companions, hell yeah. But here's another thing, not just sprites I feel are underutilized. In like older fantasy books, we had a lot of range where we're doing like sprites and ogres, you know, like very like Narnia type shit. And I feel like ogres are another thing that gets wildly underutilized. And here, I felt like we used them quite a bit, which I loved. I loved that we're like, we even had a part where there's like a drinking game with one of them. It was very fun. The gods in this are not your typical like god of water, god of light, which I really appreciate. I like, so Little Thieves is one of my favorite series, and one of the things that I like about that is we have like one that we do see in fantasy, it's very common, is the god of death, yes, but we also have the god of fortune, which I love. There's a similar god in here, the god of probability, and I love that. I love when we have gods and goddesses, a pantheon full of gods that aren't just gods of like elements. I really want to see like new things like that. It's not so much new, but not your typical pantheon. So if you are a writer looking to very specifically appeal to me, apparently the ways to go about that are pantheon of gods that are not about just elements and death, though I do love a good death god, but also sprites and ogres, and having these like different races interact with each other in very funny ways. Like Frey the sprite, she calls the ogres huge and rude, and I'm like, well, Frey, maybe they're just misunderstood. Frey is so funny. Like at one point she goes off and then she comes back and she can't find Magnus Virilis. She's like, I wonder if he went to go poop, which is gross because sprites, we don't poop, we don't defecate. And I'm just like, I didn't know that I would think that it's funny to know that sprites don't poop, but here I am laughing about it, and it's happening in rhyme. What is this? And then Virilis gets abducted by ogres, the Ortegayan, and they're all singing, and he's like, this already sucks. It's worse that all of them cannot sing on key. And I was like, this feels very Lord of the Rings right now.
The glasses and crack the plates. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates.
It really reminded me of the Lord of the Rings in a lot of different ways. Like, you know how Tom Bombadil shows up? He just like cuts in and he's just like singing his Tom Bombadil songs. This felt like that, but like the whole thing is a Tom Bombadil song. You know what I mean? But it also reminds me, because of the humor, it reminds me of like The Princess Bride when what's his face? The two that we love, Inigo Montoya and his friend, the giant, when they would rhyme back and forth with each other, and it was always very funny.
That Vicini, he can fuss.
Fuss. Think you like to scream at us.
Probably he means no harm.
He's really very short on charm.
You have a great gift for rhyme.
Yes. Some of the time.
Enough of that! Fezzi, are there rocks ahead?
If they are, we all be dead.
No more rhymes now, I mean it!
Anybody want to feel it? Yeah!
It's like all your favorite things that are rhyming from different medias smashed together. Oh, another thing I really love is a good matriarchal society. And again, the Pixies, Sprites, Frey and her sisters, they are a matriarchal society. And I just thought, like, wow, I was not expecting, like, you really don't know what to expect from like an epic novel-length poem, but a matriarchal society of Pixies was not what I was thinking that I was gonna get. I didn't know what I was gonna get, but what I ended up getting was like conversations about like overcoming fear and coming into yourself and friendship and fun, and it was such a fun time. Like, it was such a blast, and I wasn't expecting that. But I really still am just like in awe of the structure of this and the incredible amount of labor that went into this. I mean, I've never experienced anything like that outside of reading, you know, like bits of the Iliad and shit in high school English class, which I definitely did not pay attention much to. It really hit like all the notes for me. The pantheon of gods, the talking about gods, the people being hands and or like proteges of the gods on earth, people becoming gods abandoning humans. I'm just listing stuff about the gods. Go back. What was I talking about? All the stuff I liked. It wasn't just the gods. I really loved the different kinds of like fantasy races we have, where we have ogres and we have dragons and we have sprites and we have wizards. We really did such a good job of like cultivating these friendships. And there was a surprising amount of death. I was not expecting it to have any death, and then it did, and I was very sad. It was very mean of him to make me care and then kill people. That was rude. Could have warned me first. But it was surprising to like care, because you don't think that you're gonna get attached to something like in an epic poem format, and then you do. I was really surprised. But again, what really shines here is like cast, the audio, the narrators here, the audio cast actors, voice actors, there it is. The voice actors really bringing these different people and creatures to life. Kyle Derek McDonald, he voices not only the narrator but a few of the characters, and really just like such a quality production. This is honestly on par with graphic audio production. However, I would say that it is like very specifically the last graphic audio production I listened to was Elantris. I had some complaints because whenever the narrator was speaking and there was a battle scene, the sound of the music was too loud and I could not hear the narrator. So I was actually really surprised that this audio production that Kyle Derek McDonald put together was better done audio wise, and I did talk about that in my Elantris review. It was better done than the Elantris graphic audio, and I've never had an issue with the graphic audio sound levels before that. So I was like, dang, like that's their job, like the graphic audio, like that's what they do. This guy did a better job putting his together. I was really surprised. I didn't know what I was getting into when I took on this commission, but I didn't think it would be this, and I had such a great time. And I'm trying to get my brother to, he doesn't really use like YouTube or anything, weirdo, doesn't even have it on his phone, but I'm trying to get him to listen to it, because I think he's going to love this. As a fellow Lord of the Rings nerd, I think that he will love this, and I think that this will appeal to anybody who really loves that old style of fantasy but wants something like a little bit new. So if you are interested, I will leave a link below. You can listen to up to Kanto 15 out of 20, and then if you want to finish it, you will have to pay. It's like $20. and all of the money just goes back to paying his audio voice actors. And they did such a great job, so I'm really pleasantly surprised. This was really well done for a production, and if you're looking for something that you can listen to and be entertained and get really into it, I would not look any further. Like, if you're a fantasy nerd who loves graphic audio productions, I would highly consider getting into this, especially if you really like that Lord of the Rings, the rhyming parts, the Tom Bombadil parts, the song parts. Like, half the fun of The Hobbit is reading the songs, but like this is like that's the whole thing, and it's being read to you. Something about that is just like so immersive. So I will leave a link below, and I will leave a link to like all of Kyle Darrell McDonald's stuff if you want to go check him out. Really cool. I'm so glad that I got to read this, experience this, I guess I'll call it. Let me know what your favorite graphic audio or like similar production is. If you just have like Robin Miles is my favorite audiobook narrator, but if you have a favorite audiobook narrator, can you leave it below? Or if you have a graphic audio production that you recommend, please leave it below because I love those. All right, thank you so much for watching. Leave your comments and questions if you want. Subscribe if you want to, or not. Either way, it's okay. Check out those links below, and I will see you next time. Bye. Before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons. By the way, I got a new mic. Hopefully you can hear me. Well, I got a new mic because Carlos stole the other mic, so I got one of these little like ball ones. Okay, sorry. I'm getting off topic. Okay, thank you to my Therapy Bills patrons: Alexander, Allie Magpie, Amba Hextress, Cami, Chris, Claire, Des Roberts, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emperor's New Blues, Aaron, Eric, Faror, Harley, Jack and Jill, Ian, John E, Kelly No K, Casey McKenzie, Kate W, Caitlin, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lex, Alice, Peggy Lou, Rain, Reese, Samar, Scarlett, Shiny, and SMK. Thank you all so much for being a friend. And last but not least, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Starch Marxist patrons, and those are AM Angel, Amanda, Angelica, Anita, Artie the Ninth, Ashley H, Ava, BB, Beck, Blythe, Bookish Brainrot, Bree, Brian, Caitlin, Cardinal Ginger, Carlin, Cassandra, Catherine, Kathy, Chris, CJ, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Corey, Darren, Deborah, Dex, Diet Goth, Dorian, Dorothea, Ebby, Ember, Emily A, Emily L, Emma, Aaron, Ezra, Hannah C, Hannah T, Harvey Kuro, Haley, Ilianaka, India Inks, JM Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, JT, Jen Michelle, Jenny G, Justice Sue, Jillian, Jojo Bookish, Jess Pugsley, Kaylee, Kat, Katie, Katya, Kayala, Kendra, Kylie, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura, Library of Scars, Lisa B, LP, Luciri, Luna Moth, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Marcella, Marquita, Melara, MK Books, Molly, James, Natalie M, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Nyan Binary, Paige P, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Pixel Stars, Pure Raytheon, Rachel B, Rat Sarah, Reba, Rebecca, Ren, Robin, Rosie, Rowan, Other Rowan, Secoria, Sadie, Samantha M, Sarah C, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Shamed, Shanae, Shannon, Shayna, Sheena K, Sean, Sophie, Stephanie, Talia, 3 Old Dogs, Tina, Toast, Trashcan Teddy, Tito Phoenix, Valentine, and Writer A. Thank you all so much for being a friend.